Hi guys, this is Mr. Tan, and today we're looking at business strategy, and we're looking at stakeholder analysis and why stakeholder analysis is so important to the strategy of any organization. So who is a stakeholder? So a stakeholder is any person or group of people with an interest in the business. Stakeholders are groups, individuals that are affected by and or have an interest in the operations and objectives of the business. There's a video here for you to watch. So when you get a chance, have a look at this video and watch it for yourself. So really, a bit of a individual discussion here, or time for you to reflect in terms of what you think. And the question really is, why are stakeholders and the identification of different stakeholders in the business so important? So have a think of that, because this is something that as a senior manager you need to adopt a certain strategy for. So stakeholder essentials includes to identify, to analyze, to engage, and to manage the different stakeholders, whoever they are, in terms of their degree of importance and the time that you've got to spend with them within the organization. Stakeholder analysis, the aim, identify the stakeholders and assess how they are likely to be impacted by the project. The goal, develop cooperation between the stakeholder and the project team, and ultimately assuring successful outcomes for the project, which will lead to sales, which will lead to more profits for your organization. So managers at the core, donor, providers, regulators, resource owners, strategic partners, NGOs, communities, interest groups, all these can be stakeholders. You have kind of like internal and external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders are the employees, the management, the board of directors, and the external stakeholders includes the customers, special interest groups, the government, obviously, stockholders who have bought shares in your company. The community is going to also be affected by your decisions and can have a big say or delay in terms of what you do in a certain area. Banks and creditors, suppliers, internal and external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders are those who are members of the business organization. Owners and shareholders, managers, staff and employees. External stakeholders are not, part of the firm itself. Some groups can be both internal and external stakeholders, such as staff or shareholders who are also local residents. So you can get some, people who work for the company who are also part of the community and who also might be shareholders and hold shares in the company. So can you think of any others, in terms of any companies that you can imagine and see? What are some characteristics of stakeholders? Owners and shareholders, definitely. The number of owners and the roles they carry differ according to the size of the firm. If it's a one-man band, then the owner, director, shareholder, self-employed person would be doing all the different roles of the organization or the company. In small businesses, there may only be one owner, a sole trader, or perhaps a small number of partners. In large firms, there are often thousands of shareholders, who each own a small part of the business. Characteristics of stakeholders: managers, they organize, make decisions, they plan, they control, and they are accountable to the owner. The employees or staff, a business needs staff or employees to carry out its activities. Employees agree to work for a certain number of hours in return for a wage or salary. And pay levels, vary with skills, qualifications, age, location, types of work, and industry and other factors. And if you think about it, the biggest cost to any organization are going to be staff. Your staff wages, the tax that you have to pay on their wages, another 10, 11%. Pensions that you have to pay for staff now, minimum 3% per staff. And, having the staff costs obviously affects your net profit. So again, you have your sales minus your cost of goods, gives you your gross profit. Gross profit minus your expenses on the company, which is where all your staff costs go. National insurance contributions and wages, obviously will lead to the net profit. And the question really is, when you're looking at staff, how can you make staff more productive? And that comes in within your processes and practices, how you motivate them, what type of practices you put inside your organization, and so on and so forth. So staff are a very, very important part of the success of your company, because they are a big part of your expenses that leave your profit and loss account. Characteristic stakeholders include the customers. Customers buy the goods and service produced by the firms. They may be individuals, or other businesses. Firms must understand that to meet the needs of their customers, otherwise they will fail, to make a profit or indeed survive. I mean, even if you think about the definition of marketing and what marketing is all about, that marketing is a mutually satisfying exchange at a profit in the long term. So what we mean by that is that, mutually satisfying exchange. The company gets the profit to turn over, and to pay their wages and to survive and keep going, and the customers get the product, and hopefully it meets those needs, so they come back again and again in terms of the lifetime value of the customer. And you want them to keep coming back by meeting their needs, because if you don't, then in the long term you won't be in business and you won't survive. Suppliers, firms, get the resources they need to produce goods and services from suppliers. Businesses should have, effective relationships with their suppliers in order to get quality resources at reasonable prices. Now, this is a two-way process, as suppliers depend on firms they supply. I mean, supply is very, very big, because if you think about it in terms of the profit and loss account, again, you have your sales minus your cost of goods sold. Opening stock minus closing stock gives you your cost of goods. Your sales minus your cost of goods gives you your gross profit, and your gross profit can be smaller or higher depending upon the cost of your suppliers from your suppliers. So if you look at such companies as Toyota, where they've got just in time, and they work and their suppliers are integrated into their business, so their suppliers only supply them and they deliver the goods at the specific day at a specific time to be delivered, so the goods can then go onto the production line and fit it to a car at a specific time. So Toyota doesn't have to have any holding costs, any warehousing costs, any manager costs. If you think about the suppliers for Zara was one company started in Spain and now has over 2,000 outlets and turning over almost £20 billion a year. £20 billion a year, an amazing amount, and it's because they've vertically integrated backwards. They have used just in time, but they've developed good relationships and networks with their suppliers and their designers as well. The government, economic policies affect firms' costs through taxation and interest rates. Legislation regulates what businesses can do in areas such as the environment and occupational safety and health. And successful firms are good for governments as they create wealth and employment. Categories of stakeholders, there are three: internal, connected, and external. Internal: managers, directors, employees. They are immediately connected with the organization, and their objective are like to have a strong influence on how it is run, especially depending upon the organizational culture as well. Connected: shareholders, bankers, suppliers, customers, viewed as having contractual relationships with the firm. And external: government, interest pressure groups. The group will have quite diverse objectives and varying abilities to ensure that the organization meets their objectives. The various interests are as follows: internal, in terms of jobs, careers, money, promotion, benefits, satisfaction. Very, very important, because you think about jobs, careers, money, um, promotion, benefits, satisfaction, and again, this, if you go deeper into this, then you're thinking about, talking really about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of psychological needs, safety needs in terms of self-esteem, um, love and belonging needs, self-esteem, and then self-actualization. If you're thinking about Hertzberg's two-factor theory in terms of his satisfiers and dissatisfiers, or hygiene factors, with pay and benefits being on the hygiene factors, very, very important to staff satisfaction and staff motivation, which links to staff productivity, which leads to higher profits, which leads to the business staying in in business for the long term. Connected shareholders, interest in sharers, wealth, risk, bankers' security of loan, adherence to loan agreements, suppliers, payment for goods, long-term relationship, customers, quality goods, suitable price, future benefits. Obviously, the customers, the lifetime value, and the suppliers and the bankers having the right cash flow. If you don't have the right cash flow, you might have a good product and you might have sales, but if you don't have the right cash flow, or a poor asset test or current ratio analysis, then you won't be able to pay your debts, and the creditors could be called in and your company could be put into liquidation. So again, very, very important. External governments, in terms of jobs, training, tax, interest pressure groups, pollution rights, others. Government, very, very important, especially in the manufacturing industry. Back in 1992, the government said that manufacturing companies in the UK had to have, at that time in 1992, a BS was not 1993 BS 5750, and if they didn't have the quality standard BS 5750 in terms of a legislative need put by the government on quality standards, on manufacturing companies, UK manufacturing companies, then they wouldn't be able to supply to the retail outlets. So very, very important. And the government was also trying to monitor and maintain standards within the UK, trying to bring up standards. Later on, the BS 5750, moved to ISO 9001, and then ISO 9002, and then reverted back to ISO 9001. So power interest matrix, we can see, high level power, key players, take notice of them, high level of interest, and high level power in terms of low level of interest, keep them satisfied. But if it's a low level power but high level of interest, communicate with them regularly. And if it's a low level of interest and low level power, it can usually be ignored, but be careful who you do ignore. So, for stakeholders to have the power and influence, their desire to exert influence must be combined with their ability to exert influence on the business. The power a stakeholder can exert will reflect the extent to which the stakeholder can disrupt the business plans. They can cause uncertainty in the plans, or if the business needs and relies on that stakeholder. So when we're looking at the strategy, you as a part of your strategy as an organization, it's important that you undertake your stakeholder analysis. And so when you're looking at it, stakeholders should be kept satisfied. They must be treated with care. They're capable of being they're key players, large institutional stakeholders, very, very key. And they must be kept informed. Some stakeholders don't have great ability to influence strategy, but their views can influence powerful stakeholders. Keep these people adequately informed and talk to them and ensure that no major issues are arising. These people can often be very helpful with the detail of your project. Example could be community representatives of charities. Secondary school, Sainsbury's decides to open its 24 stores a day. Which stakeholders, will be pleased and which will be unhappy? Virgin Rail stops running two unprofitable rail routes. Who will be pleased? Who will be unhappy? So think about these. See if you can get as many people as possible into these three different scenarios. So thank you today from Mr. Tan.